Welcome, my name's Josh, and today I'm reviewing the Sigma 500mm F5.6 DG DN OS Sport, which is quite the long name for quite a large lens, except it's not, it's actually very small for what it is, and I'm gonna get into that in a moment. Let's get started. So first things first, as soon as you see and pick up this lens in person, it's amazing how small and compact it really is. It's just this incredibly light and small product when you consider 500. If you're like me and you've shot 500s in the past or 600s in the past, you would know they are not normally this size. And this is with the hood on too. When we take the hood off, you can see how long this lens really is. I mean, this is not much larger, frankly, than most 70 to 200s. So coming from a traditional 500 f4, this is just incredible. The engineering here is amazing. Now it is a 5.6, so you give up a little bit of that speed, a little bit of that light, but I don't think you're giving up too much. And if you're the type of person that's going out and shooting really bright scenarios and situations, outdoor sports like baseball or soccer, I don't really think you need that extra 1.6 stops. So this really is a revolutionary lens in some ways. And you might be thinking, okay, but what have they had to give up in order to get the lens this small? Well, we still have 20 lens elements in 14 groups, which on its own is quite impressive in a package this small. We still get all the functions and features that you would want on the outside, which I'll go over here in a second. I can't really figure out what they gave up. To me, it seems like maybe it's just the plastic body on the outside, the plastic parts, but I mean, it feels so solid, it feels so good. It's not like it feels cheap and plasticky, so this is probably gonna be the way of the future for most lens companies that are making longer lenses. I understand that some people want the most light possible at the best optical quality possible, and Sigma makes a 500mm f4, which is of course going to give you that, but this lens is really marketed to people that need to travel. You don't want to travel with a 7 or 8 pound lens in a 3 or 4 pound case. It's huge, it's much more likely to break when you're going through TSA. Something like this you can just throw into a regular sized camera bag. And let's say you're a Formula One photographer, right? You're traveling all around the world, you've got passports everywhere. Something like this is actually quite invaluable because you don't need the f4 anyways. The f5.6 is gonna be more than enough in most daylight shooting situations, and probably even most night situations if you have those nice bright lights that you see on the cars. I think this would be more than enough for Formula One, and it would just be so much easier to travel with. And sports like that, you can't really get that close anyways, so a 500 is perfect for that. So overall, I think Sigma did a really, really good job packing great optics at a great viewing angle into such a small package. I've never used anything like this before. As you can tell from my sunburn, I spent quite a lot of time with this thing, and I've really enjoyed shooting with it. Now let's check out its features and switches. So here at the top of the lens, you're gonna see that there's 3 custom buttons. Very nice to have. We also have a switch to declick the aperture ring, as well as a locking switch to lock the aperture ring in place in the auto mode for when you're just using the camera body for control over the aperture. Below that, of course, we have the focus ring, and we have some switches on the bottom. We have an autofocus to manual focus switch. Plus we have a very useful switch on this lens. With really long lenses like this, sometimes they chase for focus because the focal plane is just so deep. So having a switch to switch from full to 10 meters to infinite to 3.2 meters, which is the closest it can focus to 10 meters, that's just kind of nice to have because you know better than the lens does of how far away your subject is going to be. Down below that, we have the optical image stabilization switch, which of course is using an in-lens stabilization system that can give you several extra stops. And that's particularly great when you're shooting low light or slow shutter speed shots. Down below that, we have a custom switch with a C2, C1, and off position. Very nice to have because it just gives you more options as a photographer, especially when you don't want to juggle through menus. It's just nice to have everything on the lens. And the nice thing about this lens, as I've talked about in other videos before, is that because it's so light and because the lens elements inside are so light compared to other lenses of similar focal lengths, its autofocus as a result is much faster. The lighter your elements are, the faster autofocus works in general. And this is certainly no exception to that rule. The autofocus is absolutely blazing for what it is. Of course, it's a 500, it's never gonna be as fast as a 50, but still it was definitely fast enough to impress me. So I took some notes here and I'm gonna kind of go over them really quickly of who I think this lens is for and maybe who it's not for. So if you're doing a lot of outdoors and especially birding where you just wanna get great natural shots of birds, this is probably a great lens because it's light, which means when you're hiking, you don't have to worry about the stress of having a 7 or 8 pound lens in your bag. You can just throw it in your main camera bag. It's gonna be very easy to take with you everywhere you go. Having something light and compact that you can hike with does matter, and I think most people probably wouldn't prioritize that until they've actually had to hike with a really big traditional, 7 or 8 pound lens. Then they would be able to truly appreciate how much difference it makes when you're hiking. So I found that it was good for that. I found it was really fantastic for outdoor sports. So this would be sports like golf, tennis, baseball, maybe if you're shooting the Olympics, anywhere where, again, lighting is gonna be really, really good, or you're gonna have natural sunlight. And of course, well-lit indoor sports. So NBA, NHL, boxing, these professional sports tend to have really good lighting in their stadiums. Now, I did find that there was one thing I thought that this lens would be the absolute best for, and that would be safaris. Now, there's a little S here, which stands for sport. Personally, I would have made this the safari lens because traditionally, if you were going on a safari, you'd have to buy a $7,000 or $8,000 monster lens. It'd be very heavy to hike with. It would be kind of obnoxious on the truck. You've seen how on safaris, they're on the back of those trucks. That lens just gets in the way of everybody. Having something small and compact like this on those trucks when you're mobile, moving around, it's lighter, it's faster, the autofocus is faster, and you don't really need the f4 anyways. F5.6 is more than enough light, especially if we're talking about you being on the savannah or somewhere in Africa where, you just have tons of light coming down into those fields. There's no reason you wouldn't be able to get away with this lens. I feel like you'd be able to get amazing shots with this on a safari, so I'm calling it that, the Safari Special. Now, who is this lens not for? Well, because it's an f5.6, just the nature of that, it's not really going to be for really poorly lit indoor situations. So let me give an example. Let's say that your daughter is in girls volleyball and they play in the girls gymnasium at the school, and the lighting's not particularly good. You're probably going to have a hard time with this lens. This is not made for that, it's not built for that. But it is a great sports lens and it is a great nature lens if you're out in well-lit areas. Now I can only talk about the actual specs so long before you actually want to see photos, so let's just go straight into the photos. So here we have a cute little squirrel that was attacking my bird feeder. But this is a good showcase here of how sharp this lens is, how well it renders detail. When we zoom into the left here, you can really see we're getting some great action. This is handheld, by the way, with optical image stabilization on the lens turned all the way on. So looking very good, definitely a great shot with great color. Next, as you can see, once again, on my bird feeder, look at this beautiful bird. Very sharp right on the beak, that's kind of where focus ended up pulling. Yeah, just looking really nice. You can see all the detail in the feathers casting shadows on themselves. Really nice, very cool shot. So here we have a fierce looking alligator. Now again, this is shot handheld with OIS set to 2, I believe. And this is at 1/60th of a second. So you can see just how good that optical stabilization is working when we look at how sharp the eyeball of that alligator actually is. This probably would not be possible with a 500 that doesn't have stabilization built in. Looking very nice. Here we've got a bear, same thing, handheld. Looking very good when we go through the detail, all the furs rendering well. There's absolutely no chromatic aberration, and there wouldn't be at 5.6 on a lens like this, but it's looking really, really nice. Probably one of the best nature lenses you could buy if you're doing a lot of hiking. So again, same thing here, looking very, very nice. Kind of cool to see those monster claws on that bear. Great shot, very sharp, very clean all the way through. Very, very nice. Another really great shot here. This would be like my savannah shot. It is a lion just relaxing. Lens looks great. Again, stabilization working really well. But look how beautiful that lion is. Forget the lens for a second. That is a beautiful lion. This is at the North Carolina Zoo. Really a beautiful zoo. Lots of walking, lots of walking. You walk about 6 miles going around the whole zoo. So I really appreciated having a lens that wasn't 7 pounds. It was very nice. But I got some really great shots like this. Very pretty. Another thing we noticed really quickly too is that if we look at the lion's right, or our top left section of the image, you can see where it's bowing. You can see that distortion happening. It looks like a wave pattern. It doesn't just look like blown out bokeh. You can actually see the wrapping around the subject. And that's because we have a lens that's engineered to cat's eye on the outside. We wouldn't get that beautiful effect if we didn't have that cat's eye effect on those bokeh balls. So some people may not like that, but for me, I've always appreciated that because it makes the background of the image wrap around the foreground and the subject that we're shooting. So I really like that. Again, same situation here. I shot this because I wanted to see the foreground. So if we look at kind of these spots over here, this is the bokeh foreground, right? And sometimes bokeh foreground doesn't quite look like background, but in this case, it's looking very nice. You can kind of see that grass coming up through the elephant's face, which is really interesting. Next. Now this is a really great shot because we can see his fingernails. We can see clearly it's a baboon. Go up, so much detail in that fur. Again, handheld with optical image stabilization turned on. Just a lot of detail in his fur. I wish I had hair like that. It's an amazing fro. Really, really cool image. Here we've got some sports that I shot. Kind of have this super athletic guy looking to his left. Just kind of an interesting shot, but we can see the bokeh here really clearly, which is nice. See those little bokeh balls? Now you're gonna see a pattern going through them. That's because I'm shooting through a net. But not bad when you consider that I'm shooting through actual fabric in the way of the lens. It's rendering the detail great regardless. Next, now we're picking up some action. We've got somebody moving really, really fast. Baseball is interesting to shoot because basically nothing ever happens until it does. And when it does happen, everything happens really fast. So baseball's kind of hard to shoot as a result of that. But yeah, anyways, we're picking up some great perspective here. I am quite far from these guys swinging. It's not like I'm close to them. I'm out in the bleachers on the other side of the entire stadium. So very impressive for a 500 to really get you in that close. Not to mention, you know, the lighting wasn't very good at the baseball game. We were getting rained out and it was still able to get, you know, relatively clear, nice, crisp shots. So definitely a good sports lens just as it's advertised. Next shot, again, another similar situation. We've got somebody moving nice and sharp on his face. Come down, you can see the ball at his right foot on the left side of your screen there. Very nice looking. For me, that's the mark of a great baseball shot. Here, again, we've got a cool shot. Pitcher just released the ball. Nice and sharp, great perspective, a little bit of motion blur where we need it. Exactly what you're looking for if you're a baseball shooter, especially if you're gonna be on the field moving around a lot. Now you don't have to worry about an 8-pound lens getting in your way. Another great shot here. We've got a baseball player blowing a bubble. Very funny, good timing. I didn't actually know he was doing that when I took the shot, but yeah, it just kind of worked out that way. Really cool. And again, as we look to the right here, we can see those bokeh balls starting to cat's eye a bit. I should also note that all of these shots are wide open at 5.6. So you're not going to be getting any chromatic aberration or anything like that on this lens. And as you stop down, the optics are only going to get better, of course. So optically, this lens is super good. Of course, we would expect that for $3,000, not to mention the fact that it's a Sigma, and frankly, Sigma doesn't make bad glass. Moving on here, we've got a tennis shot. If you're into tennis, tennis is really hard to shoot with a 500. You can do it, and if you're in a really large stadium or a large tennis court, you could probably get away with using a 500, but the courts I was in were way too small, so it was kind of hard for me. But at least you can see some sort of perspective here of the types of shots you would get with a 500 if you were shooting tennis. As you can see, we've got a lot of nice motion blur here, good framing. I just think it's kind of a cool shot. Same thing here, you know, this is more of a portrait style shot as he's walking. I just thought this looks really cool. Maybe the player himself is just kind of epic looking, but yeah, kind of a cool shot. Here's him bouncing, getting ready to hit a ball. You know, framing is not easy when people are moving this fast. I would argue probably of all the sports I've ever shot, tennis is consistently the most difficult. People just move really fast in tennis and they move unpredictably. So if you're gonna do tennis, you might want like a 70 to 200 if it's a small court, but you could probably get away with a 500 if it's a big court and you're shooting big, well-lit professional games. For our last shot here, we've got this amateur player who was actually really good, diving for the ball. I just thought it was kind of a cool shot, some cool framing. Look at how the sunlight's coming right down on his eyes. Very nice and sharp, good motion blur where we need it. Obviously, we can tell from this shot, this lens does what it needs to do. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe down below for more content like this coming soon. See you on the next one.